Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Chaf. We're at the Mishnah Kuf Chaf Amar Aleph, 13 lines from the top. We learned in an earlier Mishnah regarding a fire which broke out on Shabbos, how much food can one salvage from the fire. The Mishnah told us there's a limit. Food for 3 meals. Why? We're concerned about over-involvement, perhaps on account of his trepidation, fear, anxiety over the loss of his property. Perhaps he'll disregard or forget about Shabbos and be tempted to put out the fire. Therefore the Chacham imposed a limit. We only save mazain, food, for 3 meals. Now what about if there's one container which contains a large quantity of food within it? Says our Mishnah, Matzilin sal male kikris. One may save a basket full of loaves of bread, even though there's enough bread there for 100 meals. It's okay since he's carrying it out in one swoop. It's one sal. Therefore, it's irrelevant if it's a lot or a little. It's one act of hatzalah, one act of salvaging. And therefore, there's no concern. He's not overly involved. He's not getting immersed in salvaging the property. And therefore, there's no concern about putting out a fire. So if this sal contains much bread, it's mutter. Likewise, the eagle shel dvela, a round glob of dried figs, even though there's a large quantity there, v'chavesh shel yain, or a barrel full of wine. So since these things are contained in one container, all he needs to do is pick it up and take it out, it's okay. Continues the Mishnah. Now you can turn to others and say, come and save for yourself. Look, there's so much food lying there, go salvage some food for yourself. Now, if they were wise and educated, and they were smart, so they sit down with him and they make a cheshbon with him, a calculation, how much he owes them for their effort. So where is he going to transport these food items to where? Says the Mishnah, l'chatzar moreves, he takes it out to a chatzar which has an erev. So he can't carry out the food to a place with no erev. So erev is the erev chatzeres we're speaking about, where all the homeowners combine their ownership by making an erev chatzeres. So only there can he transport this food. There's no allowance, as in contrast to Kisvei HaKodesh, to the Sfarim, where there is an allowance to actually transport them to a place without an erev. That heter, that kula, does not apply to food. This is the shita of the Tanakama. He can even transport the food to a place with no erev, because the Chacham applied a kula in this case, because he's saving the food, and therefore, even if there's no erev, he can carry the food into that location. So we discussed saving food. What about other items or garments, clothing? Continues the Mishnah. Now to that same place that we just discussed, Moitzi called Klei Tashmishay. He can go and transport to that place all the kalim that he needs for Shabbos, all the utensils that he's going to use on Shabbos. What about clothing? So we have two shittas. V'loivish kol mashiyocha lilbeish. Tanakama here says he may get dressed, he can put on anything, even layers upon layers. V'oitiv kol mashiyocha lativ. He can go ahead and wrap himself with anything that he can get his hands on. It has to be derech levisha. It has to be the ordinary, the common way of wearing and wrapping. Can't just throw stuff on himself. But if he's doing it the proper way, he's dressing properly, wrapping himself properly, he can even do layers, layer upon layer, as many as he can do, and salvage them from the fire in this manner. So this is the shita of Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi, no, we must limit him. Once again, perhaps through his over-involvement, over-exertion, he's going to put out the fire, therefore he's limited. And Rabbi Yossi says he can only wear a maximum of Yud Ches Kalim, 18 garments, which the Gemara will list for us as considered to be the norm, the most a person would wear at once, different types of garments. However, the Tanakama holds that since we require him to actually wear the clothing, wrap himself, derech levisha, derech ituv, he's not simply picking stuff up and taking it out. So that's a restriction enough. It's enough limitation that you're imposing on him that would preclude his preempt the concern of going ahead and putting out the fire. Continues the Mishnah, and this is going back to Tanakama, who allowed layers and wrappings. So he picks up all this stuff, he wraps himself, takes it out. Now he can undress, go back inside, come back in, and again get dressed. And transport these clothing out. So you can do many shifts. he could repeat the same process over and over. This is the Shita of Tanakama, as opposed to Rabbi Yosi, who appears to hold no. It's a one-time allowance, only one time, 18 garments. And concludes the Mishnah, he can turn to others and say, look, come and save with me. Come, put on some of the clothing, the garments, and save along with me. Now it's interesting, we have a contrast in the linguistics here, the terminology. In the Reisha, it says, come save for yourself, which indicates that perhaps the items that they're going to save belongs to them because it's hefker. Because he can't save anymore. He can only save a maximum of 3 sudas. So that's why he's using that term lochem, as opposed to the seifa. The Gemara is going to explain that he uses the term me, come save with me, because these items, these garments still belong to him. They're not hefker. They're not rendered ownerless because he still intends on coming back and re-wearing them. He can still do this process throughout the day. He's not limited. Therefore, it's not hefker, it's not ownerless, and therefore he uses the term me with me, meaning that the clothing still belong to him. Continues the Gemara. We began with the Mishnah, with this case of the basket containing much bread, and you can go ahead and save the entire basket despite its large quantity. V'atana le'reisha, we have learned in the Reisha, in the beginning of the Mishnah earlier on Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, there's a limit imposed. The Mishnah says, Gimel Suda, says only 3 meals worth and no more. So how can you go ahead and save enough bread for 100 meals? So you have 2 terutzim in the Gemara. Amar of Hunaloi Kasha, there's no Kasha here. Kam bebala hatzel, kam bebala kapil, depends what he's doing. In our case, he's bala hatzel, simply coming to salvage, to save all at once. It's all contained in one container. He's picking it up and carrying it out. So the additional effort here is very insignificant. Since it's one act, one maisa, he's not going and gathering together from the area. He's simply picking this thing up and taking it out. So what difference does it make whether there's only 3 meals worth or 100 meals worth? The difference is very slight. The difference in tirch and exertion effort is very, very slight and minimal. Therefore, there's no concern about over-involvement, and the Mishnah allows them to be matzel, this entire container. So kan b'bala hatzel here, which we allow, is speaking about bala hatzel, is simply coming to save the whole thing in one container. However, the Mishnah earlier, which says that he's limited to 3 meals, kan b'bala kapil, he's gathering together containers, and he's gathering from all over the place. It's not in one container. Therefore, that over-involvement entails a concern of perhaps in putting out, being inclined to put out the fire. So that's the difference between our Mishnah and the earlier Mishnah. Explains the Gemara. Bala hatzel, if he's coming merely to save at once, matzlas kulan, he can save the entire content. But lekapel, if he's going to gather together various containers, in that case he can only do so for the amount suitable for 3 sudas. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, who explains this. So Rashi here is 14 lines from the top, beginning with the words Gemara, b'bala hatzel. So our Mishnah is speaking about bala hatzel, shehitzil b'sal echad, he only saved with 1 basket, ketani, as it says, sal mole kikris. He's not exerting much effort, he's merely saving it all at once. Therefore, matzel kol masha basal. Therefore, he's allowed to save anything within this container. It's one shot, it's one swoop, it's one time. Mali purta. What difference does it make if it's a bit? Mali tuva, or it's a lot. However, bebala kapel salam harbe zemzeh. He's gathering together baskets. To exert himself to gather. In that case, mazayin gimel suda yachel lahatzel besalam harbe. In that case, he's only allowed to save the amount needed for 3 sudas. V'suloi, and no more than that. Shakol echad, because every basket is terech ba'atzmo, is a separate exertion. Therefore, we're afraid about over-exertion, over-involvement, and we limit it to 3 sudas. So that's the first approach in the Gemara. Depends if it's in one container, then regardless of the quantity, he's allowed to. And if it's in more containers, then we limit it to 3 sudas. That's the first approach of Rav Huna. Continues the Gemara. Rab Abba bar Zavda Amar Rav. So he said in the name of Rav a different teretz to answer the kasha between the 2 Mishnahs. Both Mishnahs are discussing gathering together containers, baskets. Still, in our Mishnah, he's allowed to salvage a large amount. Why? V'loi kasha, it's not a kasha. Kan la'oisa chatzar. Our Mishnah is speaking about transporting the food la'oisa chatzar. he's taking it to this courtyard, he's not taking it to a different courtyard. So the exertion here is minimal, and therefore we allow it, even if it's many containers. The earlier Mishnah, which limits him to 3 sudas, is speaking about transporting to a different courtyard. That involves more effort, more exertion. Therefore, we're concerned that due to his over-involvement, he might be inclined to put out the fire. We limit it to 3 sudas. So in summary, we have two terutzim. Either the difference is when it's in one container, then he's unlimited. When it's in many containers, then he's limited. Or the difference is whether it's in the same chutzner, then he's allowed to do even a large quantity, as opposed to a different chutzner where we limit him. So he asked the following question: what's going to be in the following scenario? Pires talisa. So he spread out his talis. V'kipel v'hiniach, v'kipel v'hiniach. He went ahead and he gathered together, v'kipel v'hiniach, and he placed it in this talis. V'kipel v'hiniach. What is the halacha here? Now, we have two sides of the coin here. On the one hand, he is gathering together baskets. He's involved in tircha and exertion effort. On the other hand, how is he transporting this food, this content? It's going to take place in one act, because he's gathering together in one container, one talis. Then he's going to wrap it all up and carry it out all at once. It's v'vas achas. It's one maisa. It's one maisa hatzalah. So, do we focus on the gathering aspect of it, which is extensive, or do we focus on the actual salvaging of the food, which is one maisa hatzalah? Two ways to look at it. What is the halacha here? How do we view this? How do we treat it? Give bala hatzel dami. Do we regard it as though he's bala hatzel, as simply salvaging in one shot, in one swoop, and it's mutter? Or is this regarded as though he's gathering and collecting, in which we impose a limitation of 3 sudas? So 2 ways to look at it. Says the Martah Shema, come and listen to the following right. The fact that Rava issued the following statement, he said like this: Ate Rav Shezvi Rav Chizda V'darash. Rav Shezvi caused Rav Chizda to err, to make a mistake. V'darash. And Rav Shezvi said a drasha, meaning he taught the following halacha, meaning that Rav Shezvi taught the following halacha for Rav Chizda, and Rav Chizda agreed to it. So he caused Rav Chizda to make a mistake, meaning that the halacha was not really correct. That's what Rava maintains. What was this drasha that Rav Shezvi said that according to Rava is incorrect? Going back to that brayso that we mentioned earlier in Afkuf Yud Zayin, regarding a chavis, a barrel of wine that cracked up, and he's going to salvage the contents. So he brings a kli. The brayso says he can bring a kli, collect the flow of wine. And Rav Shezvi said, listen, he's allowed to do it, ubelvad, provide, he must be careful. He cannot bring a large container which contains more than 3 sudas worth of wine. So according to Rav Shezvi, in this case, where it's actually similar to our shaila. Why? As Rashi explains, because just like in our case, he's gathering together, but he's going and gathering it into this talis. So it's ending up really being contained in one containment, one container. Likewise, in the case of the wine is coming in a bit at a time, right? Dripping into this container. So it's coming incrementally, it's coming a bit at a time, but it's gathering into one container. So it's very similar to our shaila. And Rav Shezvi says, look, you're limited to 3 sudas. So Shezvi apparently holds that we disregard the fact that it gathers together in one container with you. We look at it, we focus on the gathering aspect, since it's coming together bit by bit. Therefore, we ignore the fact that it's being contained in one container, and therefore he's limited to 3 sudas. Right? That's what Shezvi's opinion. Now, Rava, who made a statement as follows, he says, Rav Shezvi, he made Rav Chizda err by saying this drasha in front of him and having Rav Chizda agree to it. So this was a mistake, this was incorrect. This halacha is not true. So apparently, Shema Mino, says the Gemara, we learn from here, Kibala Hatzel Dami, that the halacha maintains that this type of case is regarded as Bala Hatzel, as though he's merely saving it in one swoop, in one act, in one maisa, since he's actually only taking this, because it's all gathering in this one container. It's considered to be one maisa hatzalah, and therefore he's unlimited. He's not restricted to 3 sudas. He He can take a large container and have the wine flow into it. And likewise in our case, he can take all the baskets that he wants and gather it into the talis and carry it out in one shot. It's okay. It has the halacha of bala hatzel, which is our Mishnah, which allows even a large quantity. And this is fine, it's okay. So we have a conclusion to our shaila. That in this case, we treat it as bala hatzel since he's actually salvaging it, he's transporting it in one time within one container. Therefore, he's unlimited as to the content. So now, we just mentioned that Rava maintained that Rav Shezvi's limitation is incorrect. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak asked him, "My Tu'usa, what's the mistake? How do you know he made a mistake? Perhaps he's right." Amalei, very simple. So Rava responded, "Diktani, because in that brisa, which discusses bringing the kli to collect the wine, what does the brisa say? There is a limitation, but not in the manner that Rav Shezvi presented it. The brisa says, "Well, vashal yavi kli achar v'yiklit." He's only allowed to bring one kli. He can't bring another kli v'yiklit to collect the flow from the catch it midair. Kli achar v'yitzar, bring another kli and place it next to the roof to collect the flow, the drip. So the limitation here is regarding kli achar u'deloi. He can't bring another kli. He can only use one kli. But ba'hu and that initial kli as much as he wants, kama de boy as much as he wants, matzah he can save. There's no limitation. Because since it's all flowing into one container, we view it as one act, one ma'isa hatzolah. There's no concern here. He's not getting overly involved. And therefore, what difference does it make whether this container has a smaller quantity or a larger quantity? It would be mutter. There's no concern of putting it out the fire. So in summary, we learned about saving food from a fire. The initial Mishnah told us there's a limit of food which is suitable for 3 sudas. In our Mishnah we discuss even meya sudas. We seem to have a contradiction. We have 2 approaches to answer this kasha. Rav Huna says, depends. If he's going ahead and being matzel, he's just simply salvaging it all in one container, such as in the example cited in our Mishnah where the loaves of bread are within this one basket, then he's allowed. Whereas the earlier Mishnah is discussing lakapil, he's gathering together containers, in which case he's overly exerting himself and he's limited to 3 sudas. Rav said the difference is whether he is saving to this very chatzar. In this case, he's allowed to do it even if it's a large amount. Whereas the earlier Mishnah was discussing transporting to a different chatzar, in which case he's exerting more effort, more tircha, and therefore we limit him only to 3 sudas. The Gemara concludes regarding kipul v'yinich, he gathers together containers and puts it into this one talis, this one container, and carries them all out in this manner. It's one act, it's called bala hatzel, and therefore it's mutter, regardless of the quantity involved. Continues the Gemara, the eagle shall dvela. The Mishnah told us that this fellow announces to others, Boyu ba'atzil lochem, come and salvage for yourselves. And the Mishnah continues, if they were wise fellows, they will make with him a cheshbon, a calculation after Shabbos, to get paid for their efforts. Says the Gemara, cheshbon, ma'yavidite. What room is there to make a cheshbon? Meaning, it seems in the Mishnah that need to return the supplies to him, and in return, in exchange, they'll get paid for their efforts. Why did they need to return the supplies? It's not his any longer. Mefkeru kazachu. They got it from Hefker. It's ownerless. Because, you see, in his words even, it's pretty clear that it's Hefker, because he says, Boy vatzil lochem. Go save for yourselves. The remaining food here is not useful for me, because I could only salvage 3 sudas worth. It's Hefker. So why are they required to return the supplies? The Mishnah here is discussing Midas Chasidus, attribute of Chasidus, of extra piety. Meaning, although halachically speaking, according to the letter of the law, they may keep the supplies, but they have no interest in keeping somebody else's property. They know that it was against his will that he rendered it ownerless. It wasn't really something which he wanted to do. Therefore, they don't want to benefit from somebody else's possessions, and therefore they return it to him. But they sit down and make a calculation so that he pays them for their efforts. Says the Gemara, how do these 2 things work hand in hand? Amar Rava Chasidi, if these people are Chasidim, Agra de Shabbat Shakli, are they meant to take Agra, Schar, payment for Shabbos effort? Agra de Shabbat Shakli, are they going to take that money? What's wrong? Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi here is towards the bottom. So we have the wide lines on the bottom of the Amid. Now it's 10 lines above the wide lines, beginning with the words Chasidi, Agro de Shabbat Shakli. Are they going to take Schar Shabbos? Bitmi, a question mark. Im Chasidim, if they're really Chasidim, Yeshlam Levatim Mishalem. They're meant to forego something which is rightfully theirs. B'chol Davar, regarding anything Sheyesh by Nidnad Avera, which has some resemblance to Avera. Explains Rashi. V'af agav de lav Schar Shabbos Gomeru. Even though certainly in this case it's not considered to be Schar Shabbos, because Sharei Lo Hisna, because he didn't stipulate with them, he didn't make up a salary, a price with them. They simply garnered from Hefker, they took the Hefker items, went home. It's really theirs. They weren't his employees. Still in all, they shouldn't be taking money for their Shabbos efforts. Miu chosid le mikri. A person is not called a chassid unless Elam came Nevat Mishlei, until he forgoes, he gives something which is rightfully his. So this money here, even though technically speaking it's mutter for them to accept it, but it resembles, somewhat loosely resembles, money earned on Shabbos, and therefore they're meant to forgo that money. So these people are Hasidim, that's why they're returning the supplies. They don't want to benefit from something which belongs, which is somebody else's. They shouldn't be taking money for their efforts either. Elam Arava, we're not speaking about these ultra pious people. We're not speaking about a Chaz. He hasn't attained that high level of Chasidus yet. He's merely one who fears Shemayim, he fears Avera. And therefore, number one, on the one hand, he doesn't want to benefit from somebody else's property. He's not happy with, he's not satisfied with the Lisaniya Machirim of benefiting from somebody else's possessions. So he wants to return the supplies. At the same time, he doesn't want to work for nothing. He doesn't want to work. He wants to get paid for his efforts. This is what the Mishnah means to say. If these people were wise, were smart, educated people, the Yadi who know the halachas of Shabbos, the Yadi, the Kaigavna, loves Schar Shabbos, they know this type of a scenario does not involve Schar Shabbos. As we said, they're not employees. Therefore, technically speaking, it's mutter. Therefore, they know they can take money for their efforts. Therefore, on the one hand, they return the supplies. They don't want to take something which is someone else's. At the same time, they don't want to go away empty-handed. And they know, halachically speaking, one can take money for this effort. So they make a cheshbon with him, they sit down, they make a calculation after Shabbos, and they get paid for their efforts. Continues the Gemara, Leicha Matzilan. And if we take a closer look at the Lashon HaMishnah, we see that discrepancy in the linguistics, in the discussion regarding the food. He says, Boy Vatzilu Lochem, salvage for yourself. When discussing salvaging items of garments, begadim, he says, Boy Vatzilu imi, with me. So why this disparity? Says the Gemara, why over here when it comes to food does he say lachem? Why over here when it comes to the garments? The Tani imi does it say salvage with me? Amri, so they said, the answer is as follows. When it comes to the foodstuffs, it says lachem. Why? Because it is not suitable for him. More than 3 sudas is not suitable for him. He can only salvage ela mazan gimel sudas. More than that is useless for him. Therefore it's hefker, it's rendered ownerless. It's hefker, and therefore he uses the term lachem, for yourself, it's yours. In contrast to the garments, aval gabi levushim, ktani imi, over there it says imi, why? Because it's still rightfully his. Mishum de kachazile, because it is suitable for him, l'kuli yami, for the entire day, meaning he can go in and out. As we said, he can do it in shifts. He can repeat the process over and over, get dressed, go out, undress, go back in. Therefore, it's still considered to be his. It's not hefker. That's why he uses the term bayi vatzili, me, with me, meaning salvage with me my belongings. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. Loivesh, so he can get dressed, and umaitzi, transport them out, upaishet, undress, v'choizer, go back in, v'loivish, get dressed again, umaitzi, take out, upaishet, undress, avafilu koyem kulai, can do this even the entire day long. Divrei Meir. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, he's limited to 18 begadim. Shmoinas or kelim, only 18. Ve'eluhein, these are the 18 kelim. Ve'eluhein shmoinas or kelim. Now, it's kind of hard to describe exactly how the ancient begadim looked like. Try our best. Maktorin, Rashi says, is mantle, some type of cloak. Unkli is, some say, some undershirt. Upunda is a belt, a hollow belt, a money belt, which is worn on the outside of his clothing. Kalbus shel pishtan is some sort of choker which closes up holds together two sides of the garment, made of pishtan. Right? This kalbus is made of pishtan, of flax. V'cholok, a robe. V'apilya is some sort of Rashi, a sudden, a sheet which he wraps himself with. Ma'apiris is some sort of head turban. Ushnei sefarkin, some say this is some type of pants. Two, I guess one on each foot. Ushnei min olam, two shoes. Ushnei piloi, some say this is two socks. Ubeiz pargoid, some sort of two knee straps, knee pads. V'chagor shebemasnav. This is a belt placed on his waist, meaning this is not the punda mentioned earlier, which is wrapping his, which is on the outside of his begadim. This is something which is wrapping tying the cholok to his body. So there's a garment between the punda and the chag. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to wear a double belt. There's the hat on his head, and the scarf around his neck. So in summary, regarding saving begadim, we have machlekes. According to our mayor, he can get himself dressed layer upon layer, and he can go ahead and do this repeatedly, in and out, many times. According to Rav Yossi, he's limited to 18 begadim and only as a one-time deal. Continues the Mishnah. Reb Shimon ben Anas Omer, person oir shalgdi, one may go ahead and spread the moist hide of a gdi, of a goat, al gabe, on top of shida teva migdal, different wooden types of closets, of armors, different types of chests or closets. So these closets caught fire. She'achas ben hasa'ur. So these chests have caught fire, and he's going to spread the oil on top of them on the portion which has not yet caught fire, to blunt the advance of the fire. So this oil, this leather, is fire retardant. So you can do so because the oil merely gets singed, it shrinks a bit. It doesn't burn. So it has that power to protect the chest from the advancing fire. It's a fire retardant. Continues the Mishnah. Likewise, a person can create a barrier, mechitza, around the fire using any type of kli, any type of utensil, bein maleim, whether they're filled with water, bein rikanim, whether they're empty, in order to prevent the fire from advancing. Rabbi Yossi oiser b'klei cheres chadoshim maleim mayim. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you can't make the barrier in a manner in which it's going to actually put out the fire. Therefore, he says, one may not use klei cheres, these earthenware kelim, chadoshim, new ones, which don't have the ability to withstand the fire properly. So if they're full of water, he cannot use them as a barrier, because they can't withstand the heat of the fire. And they go and they crack up, and the water flows out and puts out the fire. So according to Rabbi Yossi, even causing the extinguishing of the fire, gram kibu, as the Gemara is going to call it, is also according to Rabbi Yossi, as opposed to the Tanakam, who allows even causing the fire to be extinguished. Continues the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, talis she'achas ba'or or. So if you have a talis which caught fire mitzad echad on one side, nois no allow mayim mitzad acher. One can place water on the other side to prevent the spread of fire. V'in kavsa kavsa. No, if the fire went out, fine. He didn't actually put it out. It's mutter, even though he's causing the fire to be extinguished. Meisrei, we have a brisa which seems to indicate that to cause a fire to go out is also. The brisa says talis she'achas ba'or mitzad echad. If you have a talis which caught fire on one side, poishto meschasaba, he can go ahead and spread it out, or meschasaba, and dress himself with his talis. So the point is to spread apart the talis to prevent the fire from proceeding properly. Vim kavsa kavsa, the fire went out, fine, went out. V'chein sever Torah, likewise sever Torah she'achas ba'or, which caught fire. Poishta v'koyba, you could open it up, unroll it, and read from it. Vim kava kava, now the fire went out. It went out as long as he doesn't actively put out the fire. So we see clearly that even to go ahead and cause the fire to go out by placing water around it would be asur. Sakar Yehuda tells us in the name of Rav, even placing water is mutter. Says the Gemara, very simple. Huda Amar Reb Shimon ben Anas. Rav is following the shita of Shimon ben Anas, who in the Mishnah tells us one may spread the the oir, on the Shida Teva Migdal, he can use kalim. So you see clearly that he can go ahead and spread the fire, prevent the fire from spreading. Says in 1 second, how could you compare the two things? When did Rav Shimon ben Anas state his halacha? That's only the case of the leather, of the hide, because he tells us the reason. Because it gets singed, it cringes, it shrinks, but doesn't actually put out the fire like water does. Gram kibui mi amar. Did he say that one is allowed to do causation of kibui to cause the extinguishing of the fire by placing water? It's more yes. Meitani Seifa. Since the Seifa says, Rabbi Yosi oiser b'kleicheres chadashim le'emayim. Rabbi Yosi disagrees with Tanakam. He says, one cannot go ahead and use kleicheres chadashim, these new earthenware kelim le'emayim filled with water, she'en mecholim mekabel se'or, because they don't have the ability to withstand the fire. They misbaken, and as a result they crack. And the water which runs out puts out the fire. So Rabbi Yosi is the one who prohibits. Apparently Tanakama Shari, that Tanakama, who's Rav Shimon ben Anas, allows even using kalim, which are kleicheres chadashim, filled with water, as a barrier around the fire, even though they're liable to crack up and to actually extinguish the fire. Apparently he holds that gram kibui is mutter, causing the extinguishing of the fire is mutter. And likewise, Rabbi Yehuda tells us the name of Rav. By the talus, which caught partially caught fire, you can go place some water there to prevent the spread of fire, which will actually put out the fire, because water is mechabet, puts out the fire. So we have a source for the shita, which is the Tanakama of Shimon ben Anas of Al Mishnah. Continues the Gemara, Tana Rabbana Neir Shal Gavi Tavla. If there's a candle sitting on a tray, he needs the tray. Minar Sa Tavla, he can simply shake the tray. V'inay Felas, and the candle simply falls down. V'im Kafsa Kafsa. If the flame went out, fine, it went out. He didn't actually put it out, and it was a Davar Shein Miskaven. He didn't really intend on putting out the flame, so it's mut. Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai. So they said in the Beis Medrash of Yanai. But there's one stipulation here. This is only said, this allowance only pertains to a case when he forgot, he inadvertently placed the candle on the tray, in which case the tray is not muktzah. But if he purposely places the candle on the tray, in this case the tray itself is muktzah. Nasa bas is davar aser. The tray itself became a base, a support for a muktzah item, and therefore the tavla itself is muktzah. Continues the Gemara. Tana, we learned in the Brayso, Ner shachiri adelis. If there was a ner situated behind the door, Peseach b'nel kedarka, he may open and close the door as usual, without any concern that the gust of wind perhaps will put out the flame, because he's engaged in opening and closing doors. He has no kavanah, has no intention to put out this flame. It's a davar she'einu miskaven, therefore it's mutter. Im kavsa, if the flame went out, it went out. He's not held accountable. Layit lo Rav. Rav cursed on this. He cursed on those who follow this halacha. So Ravina asked Rav Acha, the son of Rav. Some say it was Rav Acha by the Rav Ashi. My time Elaita Rav. Why did Rav curse on this halacha? Those who follow this halacha. Why was he so vehemently opposed? Should we say Bishum the Rav Saval Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rav holds, he passes like Rabbi Yehuda that holds Dover She'enim Eskav and is Aser. So even if there's an incidental malacha taking place, which he has no kavanah for, it's Aser. V'Tana, now this Tana who allows, Katani look at Reb Shimon. He stated his halacha in accordance with Shitz Reb Shimon, who holds that Dover She'enim Eskav is mutter. So is that the reason why Rav was so vehemently opposed and expressed himself so sharply, lie it, a curse? Says more, is that the reason? Mishum the Rav Savala Krab Yehuda, just because Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, called the Tani Krab Shimon, everybody else that learns and teaches in accordance with Shimon's shita, meilat layet, Rav will curse them? No, it's a legitimate shita, it's a legitimate opinion. Why did Rav express himself so vehemently? Says the Gemara, you know why? Because Rav holds that in this case, Amar Leis, he told him, Baha, in this case, Afilu Rab Shimon Moida. Even Rab Shimon would be Moida that it's also because it's inevitable. Rav holds that the flame will go out because of the opening and closing of the door. It's inevitable. It's not merely a Davar She'enim Miskaven. It's a psik reisha. And therefore, even according to Reb Shimon, it would be asur. The Abaye, Rav, Adam, Tavai, because Abaye and Rav both said, Moider Reb Shimon, B'psik Reish V'lo Yamas. Reb Shimon agrees. He is moider to Rabbi Yehuda in the case of Psik Reish, he cut off the head of an animal, V'lo Yamas, expect not to die. So when it's inevitable, even Reb Shimon holds that it's asur, and according to Rav, this case of opening and closing the door in front of the candle is considered to be mechaber, he's extinguishing, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. Therefore, he holds that according to all shittas, this is asur. Continues the Gemara with another case. Amar Yehuda Paseach Adam Deles Keneged Hamadura. One may open a door opposite a Madura, generally a large fire. He can do this b'Shabbos. There's no concern that the gust of wind entering will fan the flames. Layitala Abaye. Abaye cursed on this, on those who follow this leniency. Says the Gemara. Let's analyze the situation. What am I asking? What are we speaking about? We're speaking about that there's merely a ruach mitzuya, a commonly found wind, which is entering, which has no ability to fan the flames. If so, my time at demand asur. What is the reason of Abaye, who says it's asur? There's no concern here. We're speaking about that there's an unusual wind, a strong gust entering, which has the ability to fan the flames. If so, my time at demand shari. If so, what is the reason of the shita that allows? Certainly, we're speaking about is merely a ruach mitzuya, commonly found wind, which does not have the ability to fan the flames. Marsava Gazrin, Abaye holds, we make a gzeira, nevertheless. If we're going to allow this, then perhaps he's going to mistakenly allow it even in the case where there's a ruach she'eina mitzuya, an unusual wind which has the ability to fan the flames. Therefore, we prohibit this as well. Umar Savar, Rav Yehuda holds, like Gazrin, we don't make a gzeira, and therefore, if it's merely a commonly found wind, a ruach mitzuya, which doesn't have the ability to fan the flames, there's no concern of opening the door. So in summary, if one has a nair which is on the tray, which was put there, left there inadvertently, in which the tray itself doesn't become muktzah, the Gemara tells us he can really shake off the candle and use the tray. When they have a nair which is behind the door, the Brisa says he can open and close that door. Rav says it's also because it's a psik reish, it's inevitable that it's going to extinguish the flame. Opening a door in front of a Madura, in a case where there's just a normal wind here, a typical wind, which doesn't have the ability to fan the flames, Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter. Abaye says asur for concern that he might do so even when there's a strong wind present. Continues the Gemara. Ois mechitza, getting back to our Mishnah, where the Tanakama told us that one may erect a mechitza, a barrier around a fire on Shabbos to prevent it spreading. You can use empty kalim, even kalim filled with water, even kalim which are liable to crack, to break apart when confronted with those flames, and this will result in the water within these kalim to flow out and put out the flames. The shita of Tanakama, which is the shita of the Rabbanon, holds that gram kibui is mutter, bringing about, causing the extinguishing of flame on Shabbos is mutter. We're speaking about a makam hefsed, a situation which involves monetary loss. Therefore, the Chacham allowed him to be goyrim, the extinguishing of the fires. Whereas according to Rabbi Yossi, one must be careful. You cannot use the klei cheres chadashim, those new earthenware kalim filled with water, which are destined to crack, to fall apart when confronted with the flames. So Rabbi Yossi holds that gram kibui, causing the extinguishing of flames on Shabbos, is asur. Says the Gemara, is this the proper formula? Lemember, shall we say, the Rabbanan Savri, gram kibui is mutter. Rabbi Yossi Savri, gram kibui is asur. We have a brisa in which we find that they took on different views. Their opinions seem to be reversed. The Sani, as we learned in the brisa, ois mechitza b'kelim rekan. One may erect a mechitza around the fire using empty kalim. Likewise, he can use kalim which were filled with water, ubemalein, provided shein darken lishtaber. Those type of kalim, which are not those that are liable to break apart when confronted with the flames. Ve'elu malein and shein darken lishtaber. What is an example of those type of kalim, which won't fall apart when confronted with the fire? Klei matches, metal kalim. So you see that according to Rabbanan, there is a concern about using those kalim, which can bring about the extinguishing of the flames. In contrast to the Rabbanan, our Mishnah, which are not concerned with gram kivui. The Brisa continues. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, av klei kvar shichen. Not only metal kalim are suitable, even the kalim, the earthenware kalim made from the earth of kvar shichen. Rashi says this offer, this earth there was strong, and they formed durable klei cheres from it, which has the power to withstand fire. So Rabbi Yossi says even these can be added to the list. Av klei kfar shichin, klei kfar chananya, ein darkan leishtaber. They do not generally break apart when faced with fire. So on the one hand, we see that the Rabbanon here in this brisa are concerned about gram kivoy, something which is totally opposed to the Shita Rabbanon, now Mishnah, who are not concerned about gram kivoy. And likewise, we find that Rabbi Yossi, although in our Mishnah, he is machmer more than the Rabbanon, he doesn't allow the klicheres to be used. In the brisa, in contrast to the brisa, where we find that he's actually more lenient than the Chachamim. Now, it's not a direct stira by Rabbi Yossi, because in the Mishnah as well in the brisa, he's concerned about gram kiboy. But nevertheless, we find something which seems to be inconsistent. In our Mishnah, he is more machmer than the Rabbanon, whereas in the brisa, he's more lenient than the Rabbanon. Says the Gemara, "V'chi teima evach masnisen." Perhaps we should say that we should switch around the shittas in our Mishnah, meaning instead of the Chachamim holding that gram kibu is mutter and Rabbi Yossi holding aser, perhaps we'll flip things around. The Rabbanon are the ones who say aser, and indeed that will be consistent with the brisa, whereas Rabbi Yossi will hold gram kibu is mutter. Now, how are you going to explain the words of Rabbi Yossi in the brisa? Says perhaps you'll say Eifach Masisen, we'll switch around the shittas in the Mishnah. If so, how are you going to explain why Rabbi Yossi discusses the Isser of Gam Kiboy? He's discussing which Kalim he could use, which Kalim he can use. If you're going to switch around the shittas, then it turns out that the Rabbanon are the ones that hold in the Mishnah that Gam Kiboy is Aser, Rabbi Yossi holds Mutter. So why does Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa relate to specific type of Kalim which don't break apart? Apparently he's also concerned about causing Kiboy. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Yossi the Brisa, with the Ram Kamar, he's merely relating to their words. I myself don't hold that there's any concern about gram kiboy. I hold it's mutter. You who are concerned about gram kiboy, and therefore you only allow clay matris to be used, I want to tell you, you can add another 2 types of clay cheres to your list, those which are durable, which will withstand fire. Says the Gemara, Omi matzas achvasla. Can that be? Can you go ahead and switch around the shittas? That the Rabbanon are the ones who hold that gram kiboy is aser, Rabbi Yossi holds mutter. Va'amar Rabba batachlifa mishmei de Rav. He said in the name of Rav, Man Tana gram kiboy aser. Who teaches? Who holds that gram kiboy is aser? Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi. So apparently he's the one that says aser. So you can't switch the shittas around. It's actually the Rabbanon who say mutter, and Rabbi Yossi says aser. Ella rather l'olam le'seifach. Indeed, let's not switch things around. U'braisa kula Rabbi Yossi. Let's not switch things around. The Rabbanon hold gram kiboy is mutter. Rabbi Yossi holds aser. How are we going to reconcile the Brisa with the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, the entire Brisa actually is expressing Rabbi Yossi's view. There's no Rabbanon included there at all. U'braisa kula Rabbi Yossi. V'chasur mechsra. Now let's learn the Brisa as though it's missing some words. V'chitanin, this is how we're meant to learn it. The Brisa begins, one may make a mechitza using empty kalim, u'b'maleim, likewise with ones which are filled with water, provided they are the types of kalim shein darkan leishdaver, which don't generally break when faced with the fire. Ve'elu ein kalim shein darkan leishdaver. What is an example of these kalim? Klei matchos, metal kalim, u'klei kvar shicha, u'klei kvar chananya nami. Those as well, ein darkan leishdaver, they will not break when confronted with the fire. Because Rabbi Yossi says, they too fit the bill. They are resistant. They will not break apart when faced with the flames. So the entire Brisa is actually Rabbi Yossi. Indeed, the Rabbanon maintain gram kiboy is mutter. Rabbi Yossi holds gram kiboy is aser. Exactly how their views are recorded in our Mishnah. The Brisa is merely Rabbi Yossi's opinion, who holds gram kiboy is aser. And he's listing for us those kalim which are fire resistant, which won't break apart in the face of fire. And he is compatible. He's going along with his shita that gram kiboy is aser. Continues the Gemara. V'rami d'Rabban d'Rabbanon. Now we can go ahead and ask a steer contradiction between the Rabbanon and our Mishnah hold that causing is mutter, in contrast to a different Rabbanon found in the next Brisa who seem to hold that causing, bringing about is aser. V'rami Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Yosi. Likewise, we seem to have a stira between Rabbi Yosi and our Mishnah holds that bringing about is aser. In contrast to Rabbi Yosi in the following brayso who holds that being goyim is mutter. The son is learned in the brayso. Harei shaya shem kasel absari. If one had a shame of Hashem written on his flesh, harei ze lo yirchatz. He may not go ahead and wash that area because one may not erase the shame of Hashem. We're going to learn it from a pasuk soon. Likewise, he can't anoint that area. He shouldn't stand in an unclean area, which is disrespectful for the Shem Hashem, on his flesh. Now, let's say he encountered a tefillah shel mitzvah, an obligatory tefillah. He was tummy, needs to be toivel. What should he do with the Shem Hashem? He wraps on the Shem Hashem a gemi, a reed grass to cover it. And he goes down and he's toivel. So you cannot go down without any protection because we're concerned that he's being goyrim, he's bringing about, he's causing the mechika, the erasure of the Shem Hashem. So you see clearly that the Rabbanan here are concerned about being goyrim. Continues the brayso. He has no problem. He can go down and be toivel as usual, provided he doesn't actually scrub that area and manually erases the Shem of Hashem. So bringing about, causing, is mutter. So this is in contrast to Rabbi Yosi, who tells us in our Mishnah that causing is aser. So that's why Shani Hasam. Over there it's different. The pasuk says, this is referring to the name of a Zara. We want to erase, to get rid of their name, the name of the Zara from that place. Don't do this to Hashem, meaning don't erase Hashem's name. The pasuk employs the term sasun. We learn from here, asiyahu da aser. Strictly doing, manually erasing Hashem's name, that is what's aser. Grama, but merely causing, bringing about, surely that's mutter. So that reconciles, that's the teretz on Rabbi Yosi. Why does he allow goyrim by erasure, by mechik of Hashem? Because the pasuk employs the word asiyah, implying that merely causing, bringing about is mutter. Says the Gemara. 1 second. If that's the case, likewise over here by Shabbos it says, don't do any malacha. Asiyu the aser. Actually doing the malacha, actively doing with a ma'aseh, a grama shari, merely bringing it about. Gram kibu should be mutter. So why does Rabbi Yosi hold that gram kibu is aser? Says the Gemara, you know what? Technically speaking, it would be mutter, but there's an additional concern. Since a person is full of trepidation, is anxious regarding his property that's going up in flames. Says Rabbi Yosi, if you allow him even to be goyrim kibui, he might be tempted to actually put out the flames. Therefore, Rabbi Yosi maintains that Shabbos is unique. Putting out a flame is unique. Even though, technically speaking, we should allow it, but there's a concern that if we allow it to be done even by way of causation, even by grama, he would go ahead and actually put it out. Therefore, Rabbi Yosi holds that gram kibu is asa. Says the Gemara, now if this is the case, kasha d'Rabbanan, the kasha of one Rabbanan on the other Rabbanan is very difficult. You know what? It's even more difficult now. The Rabbanan in our Mishnah who allow gram kibu, causing the extinguishing of the flames, as opposed to the Rabbanan in the Brisa, who say that causing the erasure of Hashem's name is asr. Why is it even more difficult now? Umah hasam. Now, since we find it over there by the fire, despite the fact that there's an additional concern, the Adam Bolam Amayna, you just said a person is full of behilos, trepidation regarding his property. Shari, nevertheless, they're not concerned about the fact that if you allow him this, he's going to go and do that due to his over-involvement. They allow it. They allow in our Mishnah to protect one's property, to surround the fire using all types of kelim, even those that break apart and bring about the kibui of the fire. So if they allow it over there, and certainly over here by the Shem Hashem, where there's no such a concern about putting out fires, etc. So certainly they should allow one to bring about the erasure of Hashem's name. So why do they insist on placing the gemi to protect the name of Hashem from the waters? Says the Gemara, 1 second. V'tizbara. Do you really think that's the pshat in this brisa? That is the concern that we're dealing with, erasing Hashem's name? Hi gemi hechidami. Let's analyze this gemi that he's placing on his hand. Hechidami. How is it taking place? Idim yahadak. If it's placed firmly and tightly, kavachatzitza. How's he going to the mikveh? It's a chatzitza. It's a barrier preventing the water from reaching his hand. Eloi mahadak, if it's not put on tight, ayli be maya. If so, water will go right in it, right underneath it, and erase Hashem's name. So what good is the gemi here? Says it in 1 second. One at a time. Chatzitza, you concerned about chatzitza? Why didn't you have this kasha without the gemi? Typically, mishum diyoi. Why aren't you concerned about chatzitza? You have chatzitza because of on account of the ink that's present, the Shem Hashem that's there. Says Gemara, that's not really a concern, but lacha, because we're speaking about wet ink, and that doesn't pose a concern. The sign is one to the price: adam, blood, vadjoy, ink, hadvash, honey, vacholov, or milk. Yiveshin chaytitzin. Only when they're dry, they're considered to be a chatzitza. Lachem, when they're wet, ain't chaytitzim. They're not a chatzitza because the water of the mikveh penetrates through them. So the diyah here is not concerned. But let's get back to the question of the gemi. Mikol makam kasha. In any case, it's very difficult. Because if the concern here is about erasing Hashem's name, so if it's tight, then the water won't enter. If it's loose, then the water enters and the name of Hashem gets erased in any case. So apparently, the discussion is not regarding erasing Hashem's name. Why? Because it's merely taking place by causation, by grama, and therefore it's mutter, because the pasuk only speaks about actually manually erasing Hashem's name. So the concern here is not about erasing Hashem's name. They hold, the Kasavri, they hold, Osur Lamed B'fnei Hashem Aram. One may not stand in front of Hashem's name undressed. Therefore, they require covering Hashem's name. But it's unrelated to erasing Hashem's name. And therefore, there's no kasha whatsoever. From this brisa to our Mishnah regarding gram kiboy, the Rabbanan allow gram kiboy. Why do they insist on placing the gemi on the name of Hashem? It's not on concern of the name of Hashem being erased through a grama. Rather, it's a whole different concern, because one cannot stand disrespectfully in front of Hashem's name if he needs to cover it. Says one, apparently Rabbi Yossi holds, Rabbi Yossi does not require this gemi to be placed on the name of Hashem. He holds, one can stand in front of Hashem's name undressed. That can't be. Says the more, he simply he'll place his hand on the Shem of Hashem and cover it in that manner. Therefore, he doesn't require a reed to be used. Rabbanan Nami, says the Gemara, if so, according to them as well, let him place his hand on the name of Hashem. Why does he need a gemi? Says more Zimnin, perhaps at times the mishtali v'shakli, he'll forget and inadvertently remove his hand and leave the name of Hashem exposed. Therefore, they require a gemi to be used. Says more the Rabbi Sinami, if so, according to him as well, Zimnin the mishtali, perhaps he'll forget v'shakli and remove his hand. So why does Rabbi Yossi suffice with merely a hand covering? Says more Ella, rather idik a gemi. You know what? If there's a gemi accessible, achinami, you're right. Of course, all will require the gemi to be applied. We're speaking about the haduria gemi. There's no gemi present. The question is, should he go look for one? Rabbanan Savri, yes, he's meant to go look for one. Why? Tefillah bizman alav mitzvah. There's no requirement, there's no mitzvah to be toiled at the appointed time as soon as he finishes the days of Tumah. There's no mitzvah. Therefore, therefore, we require to go ahead and look for the gemi to properly cover the Shem Hashem, lest it get exposed and be exposed to his body in a disrespectful manner. They're not concerned that perhaps, due to his search for the gemi, the tefillah will be delayed to the next day. There's no concern, because tefillah bizman is not a mitzvah. In contrast to Rabbi Yossi holds, Rabbi Yossi savar tefillah bizman a mitzvah. Yes, certainly there is a mitzvah to be toiv at the right time, and therefore v'loi madrinon, we don't go looking for a gemi for concern that perhaps that will delay his tefillah. So in summary, may one be goyrem the mechika of Hashem's name? Can one cause the erasure of Hashem's name? According to all shittas, that's mutter. What about causing the extinguishing of a fire on Shabbos when he's faced with monetary loss? Gram kibui. According to Rabbanan, that's mutter. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's also because we're concerned that perhaps he'll be tempted to manually put out the fire. What if one needs to be toivel when he has the Shem of Hashem written on his flesh? So he can't expose his body to the Shem of Hashem. Out of respect, he must cover it. The Rabbanan insist on him using some type of band, like a gemi. According to Rabbi Yossi, when there's none available, he simply covers it using his hand. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the Mishnah, which told us one may save this huge basket full of loaves of bread from a fire. We had a kasha, but how does this work with the Mishnah earlier, which gave us a limit of 3 sudays? Says Rav Huna, here he's saving it all at once, as opposed to that Mishnah where he's gathering containers. Therefore he's limited. Rav says here we're speaking about salvaging to the same chatzar. The other Mishnah is speaking about to a different chatzar. And therefore he's limited to 3 sudays. The Gemara told us, if he gathers containers and places them into one large container, he can carry them out all at once. There's no concern about quantity. What about salvaging clothing? We have machlekes. Rameir says he can wear layers and go in and out many times. According to Rabbi Yossi, he can only come one time and at a maximum of 18 bgadim. If one inadvertently left his burning candle on a tray and he needs that tray for Shabbos, he can shake off the candle and use the tray. If there's a nair behind the doorway, the Brisa says he can open and close that doorway. According to Rav, it's usher because it's inevitable that the flame will go out. What about opening a doorway in front of a medura? When there's only a ruach matsuya which does not have the ability to fan the flames, according to Yehuda, it's mutter. According to Abai, it's asr. We concluded that to be goyim b'chikas Hashem, all agree is mutter. To be goyim kiboy, we have a machlekes. The Rabbanan insist on a gemi being placed on Hashem's name, whereas Rabbi Yossi does not.